Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Gary Allen, and today we'll be talking about best-in-class law firm financial performance, as we have been. But today we're going to focus on collections. I'm really excited to have Emery Wagers with Confido Legal here to talk to me about that. Welcome, Emery.
Thanks, Gary. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. So let me just tell you a little bit about me. I'm a 35-year practicing attorney in a mid-sized law firm. Along the way, I experienced some really bad experiences with bad business practices in law firms I worked with. In fact, I had two of them blow up under me, and learned a lot of lessons there. I was fortunate to land with an exceptional law firm where I learned some really important things about the business of law. And that's given me a passion to help make law firms into better businesses. Along the way, I had the experience of building a startup from the ground up with Lean Law, a legal billing software company. And we're really excited to have Emery Wagers here with us today. Emery, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so Emery Wager, I'm coming at this from kind of the client perspective. So I, in a previous role, paid millions of dollars in legal bills and reviewed those bills. And you'll be shocked to know as a lawyer that as a client, getting a bill is not that great. It's usually big. It's usually bigger than you expected. And you have to review, pages and pages of time entries. But what frustrated me the most was then at the end of that, it was really hard to just get the money to the firm. So, I would put the invoice on the bottom of the pile and only pay, after they'd followed up 3 or 4 times. And so I was a terrible client, but that gave me a great perspective into how the whole kind of legal payment experience could be a lot better.
Awesome. Well, we're going to dive into that today. First thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to give you some context about the business of law. So we're going to talk about what I call the 3 Ps for best-in-class financial performance. They're your people, your product, and your process. And then we'll talk about key financial metrics that separate best-in-class financial performance from the average. And then we're going to take a deep dive into strategies to improve your collections. Let's get started. So the 3 Ps for best-in-class financial performance. Again, people, product, and process. And we talk about people, that starts with building a culture that's going to be successful in a private practice law firm. It is about compensation, never take your eye off of the money, and making sure that that provides the right incentives and the right accountability for your employees. And then finally, succession, because who wants to work for a law firm that's going to shut its doors when the founder retires? When we think about product, it's about really understanding your customer and creating the right offering that's going to get you in sync with them. It's about pricing and making sure that the price is right for your market. And it's about doing the right kind of marketing, which is very different depending on whether you're a business to business or a business to consumer firm. And then there's process. And that's really what we're focused on today. It's about having low overhead. And it's about having a technology that is appropriate for your practice, that has a light footprint and is easy to use. And then it's about documenting and following the key processes for your firm. If you do those things well, you can have a very high performing firm. And the bottom line there is really, it's about keeping it simple. Law firms are partnerships. And that means that, and the partners are the producers in there. So you want to have them focused on doing the things that produce revenue for the firm. If you have a heavy management structure or high cost structure, that's not going to work well for you. So that's basically the top line of how to create a high performing law firm.
I love it, Gary, hearing your story, how you've seen the good and then seen the bad of the three Ps. So
Yeah, I sure have. The difference was amazing. When I stepped out of one of my old law firms into the firm that I practiced with for 30 years, it's like I lost 10 hours a week of meetings the day I walked in the door. It was so freeing. It's like, oh, I can actually just focus on practicing law. It was a great experience. As you can tell, I'm passionate about this issue, and we've created a series of webinars that are going to talk about this best-in-class performance. There's one every month, and then we're doing supplemental ones like we're doing here with Emory on niche topics in it. But we've had 3 already. So talking about your firm's financial report card, its compensation system. Yesterday had a fantastic webinar with Misty Murray of Arrow Consultants talking about how to use MS 365 in your law firm. We'll switch to people in October and November with Sharon Abrahams, who's a really great speaker and an HR expert. Move back to technology in December and January. The wrong way there. And with AI and security, then into products and services, marketing and sales in February and March. And then later next year, we'll take on some leadership issues and how to improve the profession. So I hope you'll join us for all of those. And I think there's the ingredients there to really help every law firm improve.
that's quite the calendar. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, we're stoked for all of this content. It's been really well received so far. So let's talk about best-in-class performance. I start every webinar with this little talk, just so we're all getting aligned on how law firms make money, and what works and what doesn't in a law firm. So fortunately, this is really simple. Law firms make money, it's their revenue minus their overhead equals the profit. And that's really all you need to know at a certain level. Now that profit segment here is a mouse in the place where it will help me here. There are 5 elements of profit in a law firm. There is the capacity. How much can you people bill, or how much revenue can they create if they're fully occupied? Utilization, how much of that are you using? Realization, how much of that are you billing? Collection, which are our focus today, obviously what you collect. And then your overhead, but overhead relative to production as a percent. So overhead is a percentage of revenue. So so you understand what's at stake, let's tell a tale of 2 lawyers. So let's say we have 2 identical lawyers in different firms. So one of those firms is average for the key metrics that a law firm works with, and the other firm is a top performer. So what's the difference between those firms? And just a spoiler is it's big. So it always blows me away when I see how much difference there is. So when you talk about capacity, for today, we're going to assume the capacity is the same. There's another phase where you can learn to increase the capacity and decrease the hours that it takes to produce it. That's kind of the graduate level course. But for the beginner course, we're going to assume you've got a capacity of 2,400 hours. That's lawyer working about 50 hours a week, and we'll say 1,800 of that is billable. $300 an hour is an average billable rate. So you've got a capacity of $540,000. I couldn't believe these numbers when I first heard them, but the utilization in an average law firm is only 45% of that.
Wow.
Is that, it's like, and I've looked hard to find better numbers. we've polled people in webinars, that seems to be an accurate number. A best-in-class firm can average about 70% across the lawyers in the firm. Now, if you're, you know, a brand new associate, you should probably be billing more like 80%. If you're a partner with management responsibilities, or you are marketing a lot, 60 might be 60 to 70%. But you've already opened up a huge gap between those firms, whatever it is on the best-in-class side. Your billable time in an average firm based on this math is $325,000 a year per lawyer, or it's $500,000 in a best-in-class firm. When we talk about realization, that's how much of that utilize the time you work that you can actually bill. In a average firm, that is 82%. It's 95% in a best-in-class firm. So you've just, you know, opened up another gap. We're already more than $200,000 difference between the average firm and the best-in-class firm once the invoices go out.
It's amazing how it cascades.
It really is.
A little bit here, a little bit here, and yeah, it really cascades or compounds on itself.
Yeah, you know, by the time we get to collections, you know, some of these firms are just already lost. There's not that much left.
See the previous webinar.
Yeah, exactly. So now we're talking about collection, and in an average firm, collect 89% of what's invoiced. Best in class can be 95% or better. Today, we're going to talk about getting to virtually 100%. So we've now, you know, that gap widens even a little bit more here. Then overhead as a percentage of revenue is 50%, 45 to 50% in a average firm, can be 30% or less in a best-in-class firm. My firm most years was around 30, some years was down to 20%. And look at what that does to your profit number. So now the profit before distributions, meaning, you know, you're not paying your producers yet, you're just taking out the direct costs and indirect costs of producing that money, is you're down to $118,000 in profit to pay the producers and the partners. In a best-in-class firm, almost 3 times that much, so $300,000. So what's that difference over the course? You know, I wanted to put this in context. You know, so per year, that best-in-class lawyer doing the same work is making $200,000 a year more. Over the course of a 40-year career, it's $8 million.
That's so wild.
$8 million. I don't know any lawyers who can afford to walk away from $8 million. So I hope this has your attention when you think about profitability in your firm.
I saw a great post you had the other day on social media about how a new lawyer starting out their career should be asking the firm, you know, some of these financial metrics, because right here you can see that if they're going to join that firm and stay for a while, having a high performing firm is going to have a huge impact on their you know, ultimate outcome. Not to mention, you know, general sanity, as you experienced.
Well, I mean, I think back, and you know, obviously you don't learn a lot about finance in law school, and I would, you know, really didn't know what kind of questions to ask. In retrospect, that would have been the best homework I ever did, was to go, wait a minute. You know, because I was just a black box in most places. I was, one of the firms I worked for was pretty good about transparency about how we were paid and what overhead was. And you know, first of all, I was totally shocked by the amount of overhead that they carried. It was over $200,000 a lawyer in 1990.
Wow.
So, you know, there's a lot paid to keep the lights on. But at least it, kind of gave me a sense of that, and
Mhm.
I appreciated that. But mostly have no idea. And I think, even if it would be shocking or even insulting to the law firm that you're talking to, you should ask those questions, because
Right here.
here's the difference. Yeah, bring this slide into your interview. So here's a different way of looking at that. This is applying the same numbers to a bar chart. So this is the average firm with the profit of 118,000. You can see that unused capacity is a tremendous issue in that firm, and should be a focus if you're not keeping your people busy the way you want to. And then overhead is the other thing. The overhead's actually lower in the average firm, but relative to production, it's much, it's almost twice as high. So there's two opportunities here to get from the average over here to the best in class, the primary opportunities in the capacity and the overhead, with other opportunities in realization and collections. But it's still the same number at the bottom line. So let me just ask the question, does this matter? 120,000 a year, nobody's starving on that. But apart from just making more money, is this really an important difference? And I would say, based on my experience, for the lawyers, it's a big deal in terms of the freedom you experience to practice the way you want, your happiness. Like I say, I was had this huge burden lifted off my shoulders of just administrative stuff, that when I got to a good firm, and a very different retirement option. The older you get, the more you appreciate that. And then for those of you who are managers, it's going to help you retain your people. It's going to give you more secure and satisfying work, and a really different understanding of the value you provide if you're helping that firm get the best in class performance. So every year you're burning $200,000 per lawyer. Can anybody listening to this afford that? That's my question. We have put together, this is yet another way to look at this. This is a law firm report card that applies these standards to your firm. You can plug in different numbers. You'll get a copy of this after the webinar that you can play with. All right, so there's teed this up for Emory, and we're going to learn now how to achieve a near perfect collection rate. So Emory, take it away.
Perfect. So yeah, I mean, if you kind of visualize Gary's boxes, and we're going to be focusing on that collection rate. So collection rate being, of the bills that you send out, what percentage of that do you actually collect? And there's a lot of ways to impact that. It's near and dear to my heart. And it's probably one of the easiest ways to find money, specifically profit, in your firm. And we'll talk about that.
That's a really good point, because it's one thing to go find 500 more billable hours. It's another thing to just collect the bill that you already sent.
Yeah. Assuming you're not billing for hours that didn't involve any work. If you are improving, if you are doing that, you have to actually work those 500 hours.
Good point.
Whereas collection rate is, and we'll talk about this. The work has already been done to bill for that. So we're going to use the same framework that Gary did, talking about two different firms here in a second. But one of the potential symptoms you might see if you're not, tracking this really well, and know that you have a collection rate problem, is a lot more work, a lot more billing, but your bank balance is going in the wrong direction. And that can be a really baffling situation for all business owners, but lawyers in particular. So we talked about collection rate kind of data, but it's, a few different data sources here, but somewhere in the 80s is kind of the average. So if you think about this, this is crazy. $1 million firm is leaving, somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 every year on the table.
Yeah.
Just from collection.
Yeah, the 89% number is for mid-sized firms. The small firm number is around 80.
Yeah. So it's somewhere in the 80s. So I want to talk about why collections matters, and we'll talk about two different firms and two different scenarios to look at the impact. We'll talk about how to diagnose the problem, and then the best part, we'll talk about ways to fix it. So why does collection matter? We're going to talk about two different firms. One, firm A. Both of these firms, just for round numbers, are sending out $1 million a year in invoices. They do the same quality of work and they have the same caliber of attorneys. Firm A has nicer office space in a big building. And they're collecting 80% of what they send out. So they're kind of on the lower end of that sort of average range. And they get paid on average in 30 days, which is actually not that bad. It's just probably, looking at a few different data sources above average.
Yeah, it's typically 60 to 90, I think. Yeah.
Firm B has a 90% collection rate. So they collect 90% of what they invoice, and they get paid in 10 days, which is very good. And there's some tools to kind of make this happen, but that's kind of on the good end of that spectrum. So, but otherwise, they're both sending out $1 million worth of bills. So let's look at kind of the outcome here. So firm A, because they're collecting only 80% of what they bill, they're generating $800,000 a year in revenue on a cash basis. And at any given time, we won't go through all the math, but they have $66,000 that is due to them, but is not in their bank account. So they can't spend it, they can't distribute it. It's locked up in accounts receivable. And then because firms who have slower collection rates or lower collection rates tend to also have to invest more to track all that money down, they're spending an additional $20,000 per year in just additional admin expense that would show up in the overhead there. Firm B, because they're collecting 90%, they have $900,000 in revenue, and they only have $25,000 kind of locked up at any given time in accounts receivable. So at the end of the day, what is that, or the end of the year, what does that look like? Before I do that, actually, going back to the point I made earlier, not all revenue is created equal. You could go out and get a new client, but you'd still have to do all the work for that client. And you would basically, at the end of the day, get the profit from that work. Whereas if you've already done the work and you're just collecting for it, pretty much all of that money drops straight to the bottom line. So the revenue impact, as we'll see, is a little bit subtle, but the impact on profit is very substantial. So B, at the end of the year, the higher performing firm has an additional $120,000 in profit, and this is on $1 million. So, this can double kind of your post-distribution profit at the firm. An additional $40,000 in cash on average in the bank. So at the end of a year, assuming that profit is just collecting in the bank, firm B has $160,000 more in the bank than firm A. So this 10% difference in collection rate makes a huge difference in terms of your bank account balance.
Yeah, and if you think about that in terms of lawyers, there's probably 2 or 3 lawyers in that $1 million firm. Yeah, it's at least $50,000 each, maybe $80,000. That's, I mean, who can walk away from even that much?
Yeah. And if you think about it a different way, you know, to get that $160,000 in profit, how much work would you have to do? You know, basically, you'd have to grow your firm in this case by like 50% probably to achieve that same amount of profit. So that's why I say this is one of the easiest ways to kind of find money in your firm if you're in the 80s in terms of collection rate. So how do you diagnose this problem? I talked about one of the symptoms, which is more work, more bills, and lower bank account balance. One way is just to ask your bookkeeper. I mean, that a good bookkeeper will be delivering reports and telling you, hey, here's your collection rate, and you know it's in the 80s or the low 80s.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how many law firms don't really produce those numbers, though. That so what they see is billables going up and bank account going down, but have a hard time actually getting to this. So you know you got to get that straightened out, so that you can actually know what's going on in your business, to know what problem to fix. And yeah, along those lines, getting that report from your billing system. I mean, just to give a shout out to Lean Law. I mean, there's a reason Gary's so passionate about this. I mean, this is all baked into the product, so it's a great tool to have those numbers available. Yeah, I mean, I would like to think that would go without saying, but if
you can't say it, I
can't measure the numbers, then you know you don't know what your collection rate is. Then you know that's step one, is to make sure that you can figure that out on a regular basis, and that should be totally automatic based on whatever billing system you're using.
And then a little bit of a workaround. This is definitely the third best option, but just having a regular process for writing off your accounts receivable. And so if you do that every 6 months or every quarter, you know, if you track the write-off and divide that by what you billed, you'll get to, you know, the collection rate. But ideally, you don't have to do that. You can get the, you know, those reports in your system or from your bookkeeper.
Exactly.
All right, so how to fix it? My favorite part. So we think about this really in three different chunks. The first one is basically to let's see. Oh, let's go here actually. So the first one is to implement a collect early billing model. So there's a few different ways to do this. One is a really powerful tool. We see a lot of high-performing family law firms use this. But basically, you're accepting a advance fee deposit at the beginning of a case, and you're always working against money that's you know in the client's trust account. So you're continually requesting additional funds, and you're kind of keeping ahead of the case. And if it's, you know, if it's going to trial, you're gonna bump that up. If maybe nothing's happening you know, at that time in the case, you can let it come down a little bit, but you're always working against the against that. And I don't have the numbers on the at the forefront of my mind, but we have a mutual client that implemented that model, and something like found $1 million in their bank the next month after implementing this model.
Right. No, that you know, I think the story about this one is it's a lot of work to get it set up right, because you're automating an entire, you know, invoicing to payment process, and it's going to be repeated every month. The payoff is 100% collections. So if you're having a collection issue, you know, it really makes a huge difference. And that was, you know, a 20-some lawyer firm that did add $1 million to its bottom line.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. But you know, they had to work hard to do that. We had to work hard to build that workflow for them. But for the right firm, that's a great option.
Yeah. I think they even have a key performance indicator now that's what percentage of our monthly revenue could just be moved from the trust account, to our operating account.
Yeah,
And trying to get
exactly.
that to basically 100%, so that they were always, working against money that they already had in the bank.
Yeah, that's the ideal, if you
Mhm.
can, if you can pull that off. Yeah, someday maybe all law firms will be working that way. I mean, my law firm never worked that way and still had really high collections, I will say.
Mhm.
But that's just because of the kind of clients we had and the kind of relationships we had. But there was often a huge amount of receivables,
Mhm.
millions of dollars of receivables sitting out there.
Mhm.
Because we worked with real estate developers who like to, play with other people's cash. But it still worked. But evergreen retainer is the gold standard to me.
Mhm. Um, an iteration of that model, we call it the stored payment methods model. It's very similar to the evergreen retainer, except for you don't. It removes all of the trust accounting issues. Because basically what you're doing at the beginning of a case is you're requiring that the client keep a payment method on file, a bank account or a credit or debit card. And then you're basically saying, okay, we're going to send out the bills on the 3rd of the month. And then if we don't hear from you within a week, we're going to bill that payment method on file. So the client basically has to do, well, not basically, they have to do nothing to pay. So it's really easy on the client. They still have that dispute window. Of course, it's not as ironclad as actually having the money in the trust account, but it's pretty close. And we don't, you might say, oh, do clients dispute that or whatnot? We don't see any elevated, disputes or chargebacks for firms using that process. So it seems to work very well. Again, not quite as ironclad as the evergreen retainer, but very similar. And unlike the other two models we'll talk about, it doesn't require you to switch your billing model. You can still bill hourly, and
Right.
the logistics around it are a little bit easier.
So what sort of resistance are you seeing from law firms to that? Because that one seems kind of like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, this is easy to implement. I mean,
Yeah,
there's some firms that are nervous about keeping a payment method, on file and the security around that. But, there's a lot of, digital security. You definitely don't want to be writing, doing this by writing it down on a piece of paper, or like,
right.
taking it via email or something like that. There are ways to do it securely. Just think of your, Netflix, your gym, Amazon, like they all have these, have your payment methods on file. It's fairly standard now,
Yeah,
to do that. And there's no reason a law firm, can't use similar technology to handle that data securely.
yeah.
Um,
I would love to see a lot more law firms using that type of method. Not much more work, and it gives you much more security about your payments.
Yeah, and coming from the client perspective, it's great, because I don't want to think about, how do I get the money?
Yeah,
I have to
exactly.
literally do nothing, and I'm still given the chance, like I said, to dispute anything, but
Right.
I don't at the end of the day have to do anything to actually make that payment.
Yeah. Cool.
And so the other two are kind of iterations of each other, flat fees and subscription, which is just kind of a continuing flat fee. This, of course, is if you're not doing it, requires a pretty significant overhaul of your billing structure,
Right.
and may not be realistic in all cases. Although, with improvements in technology and automation and AI, I think we'll see a lot more flat fees, because as processes get easier, it'll be more and more challenging to bill hourly, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I never figured out how to make a flat fee work as a practicing lawyer.
Yeah.
And I think it was the nature of the matters that I worked on that especially litigation,
Mhm.
is, I describe it as you're trying to build a house and your opponents are trying to tear it down at
Yeah.
the same time. So how much is that going to cost?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think there's still a lot of legal matters where that's difficult.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I don't know that I think better data will help and certainly can help you get into ranges that
Mhm.
lawyers are not good at figuring out without that kind of data, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've heard about, in cases, lawyers doing flat fees as kind of part of the case, like, we'll do document review,
Yeah.
now that, we have AI to review it, it's less risky for us to say, it's gonna be X amount for, the document review, and so maybe we'll see it, clump up in certain places.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, sort of split the fee out so you can price the predictable part with a flat fee. That makes sense.
The other thing about flat fees is that in most states that can just be dropped right into the operating account as earned. So you do get that ahead of time as well. So and then subscriptions just kind of an ongoing regular version of flat fees. So that the implementing a collectorly billing model here is probably the most powerful thing that you can do kind of operationally to improve collection rate. And as we talked about, I think this is sort of the dark horse. The stored payment methods model is very easy to implement, a quick change to your engagement agreement, and you can implement that right away, and you don't have to change a lot of things.
Yeah. No, I'm surprised that hasn't sparked more than we've seen it.
So the second category is offering payment flexibility. So, credit cards, they are not just for airline miles. Some clients will actually need that it's the difference between being able to afford the matter and not. And so remembering that credit cards actually do provide credit to clients, both consumers and businesses as well. Number two, payment plans. Got to be careful with payment plans. We've seen some firms get out over their skis a little bit with the payment plans. So trying to make sure that the payment plan matches the timeline of the case, of the legal work, so that you can, if that payment method starts declining on the payment plan, you can kind of stop work and you're not too far in the red on that.
Yeah, it's to me the whole thing here is we want the law firm not to be the bank.
Yes.
That's and law firms make themselves into the bank at just shocking regularity. And I think that's just not a way the law firm's going to make money. Bring in the banks and they will happily figure out a way to help you share that risk.
Yeah, and that leads perfectly into the client financing. On the consumer side, it's sometimes called buy now, pay later, but there are some lenders out there that will help consumers and businesses with legal bills. So having at least some names and some recommendations for your clients can be really helpful there. And then the third category is just kind of general housekeeping. These are things you can implement like in the next hour. And there's no reason not to do it because it's so easy, but so many firms just don't do this. So have like a link to pay on the invoice. That's really, really important. I'm thinking about my perspective as the client. If it's not really easy for me to pay, I would put it on the bottom of the pile. You don't want the invoice going on the bottom of the pile.
Exactly.
Automated reminders. There are tools out there when the invoice is generated and sent that will just run, automated reminders. So you don't have to, think of, ooh, how should I word this? It's obviously an automated message. So you can create your template once and just have it go out automatically. If there are clients that still require you to mail an invoice, you can have put a QR code on there to get to that payment link. So, and then having an option to pay all outstanding. The last thing you want is, a client with 5 invoices that have piled up to have to sort through their email to figure out when they're ready to pay, which ones were which, and
Right, what's left to
Yeah.
pay, right.
you want them going to that last invoice and being able to pay off their entire balance. So like I said, these are things you could do right now, and they're very easy, but make a real impact.
Mhm.
So yeah, so just quick recap. We talked about why does a collection rate matter, and the massive financial impact it can have, particularly on profit
Mhm.
for a firm, how to diagnose it, and then how some solutions for fixing it and improving it. So.
Very good. Thank you, Emery. That's what I really liked about that is understanding that this is really the easiest way to add to your bottom line. I mean, there may be bigger things that you can do, but this is something you can do right away. And it's a really good exercise starting to get your shop in order as far as, those overall improvements that you need to make. This is really a good job one to start moving your firm to best-in-class financial performance. So thank you so much for that, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Gary. It was great.
We've got when you receive this, you're going to receive an email that links to more resources. So you're going to see the slides and recording, obviously. You're going to be able to download that law firm financial report card. You'll have the opportunity to join Lean Law's free open community on best-in-class financial resources and on performance at school.com. It's, like I say, free and open community. You have lots of your peers in there who are law firm managing partners and law firm administrators, along with selected experts who kind of sing from the same song sheet that we do, who can, who are resources for you to figure out how to get your firm to a better place. We also will provide you a subscription legal services guide and from Emery, and as well as a flat fee financially legal episode.
Yeah, we're going to be recording that next week, so I'm really excited about that.
That's fantastic. So lots more information if you want to dive into this more deeply. And here's a little more information here about the source of the financial statistics that we were talking about earlier. So thank you so much for joining us. And that's the end of the webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.